Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. We have a lot to do, but first, super exciting news. The king, Bill O'Reilly, the guy, is now here on the 1st, and he's gonna be here every day at 8 p.m. Eastern, his new show, No Spin News. Right. Also, you can download our app for free in the App Store. Just search for The First TV, and you get me, Jesse, Buck, I'm forgetting Dana, of course, and now Bill O'Reilly every weekday at 8 Eastern. Let's take a deep breath. Okay. This is going to be a crazy week. Here we are. All right. Things move fast. A couple weeks ago, the media said it was the end of the world when like 100 people gathered in Michigan to protest lockdowns, and now thousands of people are protesting and rioting and looting and not a peep about the virus. Things move fast. Before we even get into it, let's outline a couple principles here of how I like to approach big things like this. And a lot of the lessons from COVID actually can be applied to this thing as well. So I have 4 points here. First thing, let's embrace uncertainty and look for nuance. So this is a skill that I learned a lot during COVID. Right? As much uncertainty as there was in the very beginning of COVID, we have the same thing here now. It's never going to be as simple as the media makes it out to seem. We're going to spend pretty much the rest of the show talking about how the media has made this all way worse than it ever needed to be. This was an opportunity for the country to unite, and the media would have nothing of it because they have no other role in our society today other than to cause chaos for their own benefit. And they did that here too, and it's awful. We're going to talk about that a little later. But the media will make things out to seem black and white. And everyone's got to pick their side, pick your team. Resist that, fight against that with every fiber in your being. Don't do it. Look instead for the nuance. So give me a quick, easy example. We're gonna talk a lot about this, obviously, as the weeks go on, right? But just quick example, you got your protesters, rioters, and looters. 3 different groups of people. The overlap, sure, right? But it's easy to put everyone in one category, right? To look at the looters and judge everyone by the looters that you see. Or if you're on the left and you want to ignore the looters, it's easy to look at just the peaceful protesters and then ignore all the looting that's going on as well, right? We need to be people smart enough, wise enough to take it all in, right? And have the nuance, say, okay, that's that group, that's that group, that's that group, that's their motivation, that's them, that's them taking advantage of them. Like, we can do that. But the media doesn't want that. They want you to be like, oh, you're here, you're there, fight it out. Not anymore, we're not doing that. So just to give you an example, here's a video of people wanting to loot a Target, and there's a group of, I'd say, protesters preventing them from doing so, right? So these are 2 different groups of people at the same place, but they're distinctly different, right? You have some people want to loot it, and then other people protecting them from looting, right? So you can't put them all in the same category. I don't know anything about the background with this picture here, but it's in Louisville. And you had a police officer who got separated from his group, and you had a group of protesters protecting him from people who wanted to attack this one lone police officer. Also, when you're looking at the looters, rioters, protesters, you got your Black Lives Matter, and then you also got your Antifa. All right, you got to think about the Antifa, by the way, as our friend Hans Fiend wrote. He said, in case you didn't know, Antifa stands for entitled rich brats who hijack legitimate causes and turn them into violent riots, because that's what happens when you give your children everything except something meaningful. Like, that's just if you're wondering. Yeah, so to go a little deeper, because he's a pastor, so he likes to go back to the ancient Greek. So Antifa is ancient Greek, and it's Greek's hard to kind of translate, but it's roughly translated as mercenaries you didn't hire, bragging about how they've defeated your enemy by setting your own camp on fire. That's Antifa. So we got to be able to look at the difference between these protesters, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, who's doing what. So that's the first thing. Find the nuance. Second point, don't let your heart grow cold. Usually in the Bible, it talks about a hard heart, but there's also a cold heart. Matthew 24, Jesus goes in this whole thing about how things are going to get bad. Nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. So there's going to be famines, there's going to be earthquakes. And here's a line. He says, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive the people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Because of the increase of wickedness. Would you say there's an increase of wickedness going on right now? Have you seen that this weekend? My Twitter feed went from like in-depth scientific analysis of viruses to people getting punched in the face in a day. There's an increase of wickedness out there, at least we're seeing it now more. And because of that, the love of most will grow cold. Not all, not you, because the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. We live in right now, it's a very toxic environment, and the media is fanning it, as we'll talk about. But that very easily can cause us to lose focus and lose hope and lose perspective. Don't let your heart grow cold to your family, to people around you, and to like people. It's like society in general. There is good. Look for the good. There are a lot of protests here in San Diego this weekend, and here's just a picture. I mean, there's tons of these pictures here, but a picture of volunteers cleaning up the mess. Cleaning up the mess after the riot. They don't have to do that. You know, they volunteer too. No news coverage for them, by the way. There's a lot of good out there. Here's the police chief in Camden, New Jersey. He's marching with the protesters. The protest, not the looters. And this is the sheriff of Flint, Michigan. It's Genesee County in Flint, Michigan. And he deserves all the attention he can get from this.
The only reason we're here is to make sure that you got a voice. That's it. There we go. Don't think for a second that he represents who these cops are from all over the county and around this nation. We go out there to help people, not do that nonsense.
There we go.
I just want to tell you, where's my man? Right there. Where's the gentleman?
Oh, I think he took off.
Okay, yeah, my man.
He took off.
Pastor Hawkins, see, I was going to tell you. We want to be with y'all for real. So I took my helmet off and laid the batons down. I want to make this a parade, not a protest. You got little ones here, you got dogs, so what's up? So listen, I'm just telling you, these cops love you. That cop over there hugs people, so you tell us what you need to do.
Walk with us! 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 Walk with us!
Let's walk. Let's walk.
That's great. Now, you walk with those people, but also the sheriff has to be prepared to prevent rioting and looting from different groups of people. There are different groups of people we obviously treat and act differently around. We got to do a segment later in the week when we have a minute about the Charleston church shooting. Remember that many years ago? That was 5 years ago. And then there's the Arthur Ravenel Bridge, and there was a unity, now it's called the Unity Bridge because of the coming together of the community after that. The media couldn't stoke the flames of hatred after that shooting in that community, and they set a model for us. So we should review that. We'll do that another day. So anyway, there's a lot of goods. So that's the second point. Don't let your heart grow cold in the midst of all. Third point, curate your inputs. This comes from John Tierney, who we talked to a lot. We talked to him last week. Curate your inputs. If you passively go through the day, the media will bombard you with the worst of the worst all day long. And you won't even really notice it's happening, but your soul is just getting crushed throughout the day with just all this toxicity and evil and hatred, and it'll exhaust you. Gary Kasparov is the chess champion guy. He said the point of modern propaganda is not only to misinform, it is to exhaust your critical thinking and to annihilate truth. The goal is to exhaust you with coverage. And we've all felt it to a different extent. Just like, oh. Like I already feel it like preemptively. Like I'm exhausted for the week that will be because I know what's coming. But the more exhausted you are, and if they can annihilate truth, easier for you to be manipulated. That's the goal of that. I know it sounds so weird. It sounds like hippy-dippy weird when you first hear this. When I first read it, when I first started saying it, it sounds weird. It's getting more comfortable to say. But I just want to recognize that what I'm going to say right now, like I understand this sounds like weird hippy-dippy, but this is all really bad for your soul. You were never, I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago with COVID, you were never meant to take in the daily death counts of every city in America from COVID. But that's what you got. You turn on the news and it's like, 1,000 people here, 100 people here, 100 people, but every city, you're like, geez, like you were never meant, your soul was not designed for that. And same thing here, your soul was never made to take in the pain and violence of every city in the country during this time, but you were bombarded with it. The front of Drudge all weekend, it literally just lists cities. It just lists every single city that has riots going in it right now, and you'll drive yourself mad. Sunday morning, first thing I did, this is literally the first thing I did is I opened up Twitter, which is a terrible idea anyway, but especially now. And literally the first thing I saw, there was a woman who punched a police officer twice in the face. She was like 40 years old. It's a 40-year-old black woman. She punches a police officer twice in the face. And then another police officer, a black cop, came up behind her and just punched, like cold cocked her right in the face. And she falls down to the ground. That was the first thing I saw on Sunday. Okay, that's not good. That's not good for your soul. I saw people beating a husband and wife, business owners outside of their business, and they had these big long sticks and poles, and they were beating the wife. And there was a desperate husband trying to stop this crowd of people from killing his wife. You've seen videos like this, and they're not going to stop. So there's a fine line that I just want to be aware of here, of taking in what's really going on, right? Because you don't want to just cut it all off and live in ignorance, unless your soul needs that. If your soul needs to just like forget about this, that's great too. Actually, there's merit in that. But you got to take in what's happening, but also don't take on the weight of the nation and the weight of humanity and the weight of all of humanity's race relations on top. You can't do it. So you got to try to find that line intentionally, because if you don't, it'll all blend together, and then you'll be inundated with the worst of the worst, and that's not good for you. And then you'll get angry or scared or a bunch of other bad emotions. And again, it's going to be easier and easier for the media and politicians to manipulate you when you're in that state. Don't let it happen. So there you go. And let me just make this point. That's why I wanted to put those three first, because of the manipulating part. I want to make all of us, me, you, all of us, manipulate proof. I want it to be impossible for us to be manipulated by the media, because that's their number one goal in all of this. So if you look for nuance, if you don't let your heart get cold, and if you curate your inputs, the media can't get to you. And then final point, perspective. Same thing with COVID, right? With COVID, one of our themes was there's nothing new under the sun. So we tried to provide as much perspective as we could, right? Here's this plague in 185 with Marcus Aurelius. Here's this plague in Marseille in 1780. Here's the 1918 Spanish flu. There's nothing new under the sun. It's very easy. I don't know if we did this segment about being a chronocentrist. So there's a technical term for this, chronocentrist. And it's when you get in this belief that the moment you're living in right now is paramount. Like what you're living through is the worst of the worst ever in history. And there's never been anything like it. You heard all the time, it's, what was the word they used? Unprecedented. like a plague is definitely not unprecedented, people. And same thing with this. Like, this is not this too shall pass. I think if we hold on to these, the media won't get us all riled up like they want. Just like an example, we had a real civil war in this country before. Right? Things were pretty bad at one point in our history. We're not even there yet. So remember, as John Tierney taught us, the world will always seem like it's falling apart, and it's never as bad as it seems. So I mentioned all the media a lot here. Let's do that next. We'll talk about media manipulation next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, let's talk about the media now. So let me start off with this. This is Antoine Tucker. He's running for Congress, actually, against AOC in AOC's district in New York. So here's what he said this weekend.
For all the riots that's currently happening in Minnesota, I blame the national news media and their race-baiting tactics. Make no mistake about it, any officers that are involved in any deadly shootings of any innocent individuals, no matter the color, deserve to be put in prison. Any officers that are beating on citizens and violating their rights deserve to not only be fired, but be put in prison. But the national news media, they never actually cover all of it. They don't give a about Black America, and they're not in our communities when 50 individuals are being murdered, 100 individuals are being murdered, 300 individuals are being murdered. They don't give a about us. The only thing they continue to present and put out there is colored-based issues when dealing with law enforcement and just citizens, period. That's it. They only played the race game. If the news media covered events the way they were supposed to, we wouldn't have like this happening. So many people are rioting, so many people are upset is because they've been fed all of this energy by the news media.
Yeah, it's true. So John Nolte wrote a really nice piece called "Americans Should Be Allowed to Unite Over George Floyd." Everyone agrees that was absolutely out of control. Every single person, but we should be able to unite over how awful it was and discuss some big changes moving forward. But the media cannot allow that. There was a video going around the other day of some big bearded rednecks with big guns standing outside of some business and they were protecting it. They called themselves rednecks with guns. And they said they support the reason why people are protesting, but they don't support the looting. And they were there to stop the looting. I watched that and I said, oh, there's a unity potential there, right? There's a unity of Black Lives Matter protesters and rednecks with guns. And then I saw another video of a bunch of black guys with big guns standing outside of their businesses with perfect trigger discipline, by the way, fingers off the trigger, protecting businesses' rights. So there's massive unity between bearded rednecks, Black Lives Matter protesters, and protectors that could potentially happen here, and unity between the left and the right on this, but the media forbids it. They can't have that unity. And here's the key line from Nolte. He says, causing chaos is the only influence that the media have left. Ooh, think about that. That's such a good line. Causing chaos is the only influence that the media have left. It's true. Let me quote at length here because it's so good. He says, let me put it this way. If you're in a room full of people enjoying a robust political debate and no one's paying attention to you because you've been caught lying too often, been caught inventing facts too often, you have only one option to call attention to yourself. All you can do is stand on the table and scream, fire. And it always works. Screaming fire shuts everyone else up, puts all eyes on you. And best of all, everyone reacts to you, to what you're saying. Watch them scramble, watch them panic, watch them scratching claws that crawl over each other. That's the corporate media today. That's all they have left. They can't win a fair debate. They can't participate in an adult discussion anymore. We don't trust them anymore. You've seen every time there are these polls every once in a while of like institutions in America and how much we trust them or don't trust them. It'll be like CIA and the FBI and the Supreme Court. And the media is always the lowest. They have like 10% of people trust the media. Like zero trust. And that's their fault. We don't trust them anymore. They have no credibility anymore. Plus, we're informed now. They have access to the same information we do. Or we have the same access to the information that they do. So we don't need them. They're useless liars no one trusts or believes, but they can still stand on the table and scream fire. Like any criminal or gangster or anarchist, like anyone evil enough to do so, the media will always have the power to spread fear, panic, and chaos. That's 100% true. Why do you let these people into your life? Why would I invite that person into my living room? Why would I turn on the CNN or whoever and just let them spew this filth into my home? You would never let that person into your life. Like a person. If there's a person who just spread chaos in your life, you maybe have that person. That's just drama all the time. You can cut that person off. Cut them off. Don't let them into your life. And the same thing with the lamestream media. Cut them out of your life once and for all. They're not doing any good. Someone who just sabotages anything good that might be coming in your life. You don't let that person hang around. But we let the media into our hearts. And we think it's okay because it's news. It's not news. There's no news. They're pumping the worst of the worst into your soul every single day, all to manipulate you. Have you seen the movie, the Bond movie, Tomorrow Never Dies? The bad guy, for our Bond fans here, Elliot Carver was the bad guy. And it's interesting, he may be one of the most fascinating bad guys because he's like the most realistic. He's the bad guy that's most likely to exist. So this was 97, I believe, Tomorrow Never Dies. So the bad guy is a media mogul, and he manipulates things around the world to make news so that he can sell his newspapers and get bigger ratings and stuff. So his big goal in the whole movie is to start a war between England and China to try to destroy the Chinese government, and then he would get the exclusive broadcasting rights into China. That's the big overarching thing. But he does this all the time. He manipulates events all the time, makes events so that he can sell newspapers. It's called the Carver Media Group, right? So they report on the events that they cause. So here's one scene where he's talking to, keep in mind this is 97, where like this room that you're gonna see here with the big, like this was like super space aged in 1997. So here's where he's talking to all the different people who caused the bad things to happen here.
Gentlemen and ladies, hold the presses. This just in. By a curious quirk of fate, we have the perfect story with which to launch our satellite news network tonight. It seems a small crisis is brewing in the South China Seas. I want full newspaper coverage. I want magazine stories. I want books. I want films. I want TV. I want radio. I want us on the air 24 hours a day. This is our moment. And 1 billion people around this planet will watch it, hear it, and read about it from the Carver Media Group. There's no news like bad news.
As Antoine said, you think the media cares about the people of Ferguson? Think they care at all? Used them. Russia collusion, Charlottesville protests, drink bleach. Right? The media is constantly causing chaos when it's not there or doesn't need to be there. They are gasoline on the fire. They're a force for bad, and it's all they can do. That's all they have left. So he's got a good example of this. This is from this weekend, or maybe it was Friday. There's a CNN reporter who was in the middle of this big intersection, and it was in Minnesota or Minneapolis, and it was totally blocked off by the Minneapolis police or the state police of Minnesota. I don't know who it was, but they were all, the police were all in riot gear and everything. And it looks like he was the only one in the street, him and his, I think it was 3 camera crew and producers and everything. So these 4 guys who were in the middle of this giant blocked off intersection, and they were told to get out of here 100 times, and they arrested him, live on camera, right? You've seen it by now. And the governor released him after they found out that it was CNN and all that. It's a really bad look for the police, right? Not a good look for the police to arrest the reporters. But I share this because CNN loved it. Okay, they're gonna play the victim card about this whole thing. Oh, like we're such heroes out there on the front lines, and we're like, no. They loved it. I could just imagine the production crew back in New York City just loved it. Keep the cameras rolling, This is amazing TV. Did they manufacture it? Like, did they hire the police to arrest? Like, no, they didn't. Probably didn't do it like Elliot Carver did. But they didn't do anything to stop it. I mean, they're standing in the middle of this giant intersection they were told to clear out of repeatedly. Oh, but we're the media. We can go wherever we want to go all the time. No, you should just get out of the way. So I don't want to say created. They didn't create it, but they didn't do anything to stop it, right? And then they became the story. And then you have this insight from the anchor on whatever the name of the show is that they were on. And so this scene, they were talking to this scene. Here I am, like it's a movie. In this scene, the new anchor is talking to another reporter from CNN who was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, and they told him to move, and then he moved, and then it was no big deal. So the CNN anchor is talking to that reporter. Here's what he said.
Josh, I don't know if you could see what was happening to Omar from your perspective, and I know that our audience can't see you right now, so let me just say something. And it is a statement of fact. You, Josh Campbell, are white. Omar Jimenez is not. I do not know if that played into this.
Yeah, no, it didn't. It didn't make a difference. But let's make this entirely about race, too. Everything has to be, right? If that's all you have left in the media. There was a chance to have some unity out of this. Maybe it's still there, too. Right? But people were mourning together over the death of George Floyd. People were mourning together. And the media came in and said, no, we can't have this. We can't. White people over there, black people over there, everyone, back to your corners, please. Black people, I need you to, we loot some stores. Can you loot some stores? Perfect. All right, now white people, check out those black people looting the stores, right? What do you think about that? They're terrible, aren't they? Yeah, go ahead, make your talking points about looting. Okay, perfect. Angry black people. Can we have some angry black people, please? Okay, do you guys want to light a building on fire? Not yet. Let's wait for our crews. Crews, we ready? All right, come on in. You guys can light the building on fire now. All right, camera crew, perfect, right there. Got the shot all framed up. It's great. And everybody, places, people, places, and action. And there you go. There you got your ratings. Okay, it's a very lucrative game the media plays. I suggest we stop playing. And we got one more segment, and then we're going to talk to Professor Rackaniello, because believe it or not, there's still a pandemic going around that no one seems to care about anymore, which is wild. I want to talk about empathy coming up next. True story. Thanks, Slater. By the way. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to talk about empathy for our last segment here before we move on to COVID. Empathy, first of all, because this officer who killed George had none. It was soulless. Cold is the word that I used last week. Actually, he was charged with third-degree murder, which is an interesting, only a couple states, like 5 or 6 states, have a third-degree murder charge. Here's the definition. It's causing the death of another by perpetrating an act imminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind. I always have to look up that word, evincing. I think it's like proving or something. Come on, internet. Let me down right on the TV. Reveal the presence of. Okay, yeah, so revealing the presence of that's right. So revealing the presence of a depraved mind without regard for human life. That's what that was. It was depraved, right? It was just this soulless, depraved mind without regard for human life. Third degree, that seems to fit pretty good. So empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Now, what's interesting about this word is it's only been a concept for about 100 years. 1908, there were some psychologists at Cornell who came up with this word, but when they originally came up with it, it had the exact opposite meaning. So it's funny how words do that, right? The word peruse originally meant to look carefully at something, and now we use it as like, oh, I just perused it real quick. I don't really know what it was about. I just perused, right? We flip around. So same thing with empathy. So it used to mean it was your ability to project your emotions onto someone or something else. The Greek it means feeling in. So you put your feelings into something. So that was in 1908, and it was about that for 50 years. And then in 1955, Reader's Digest came up with this. They flipped it around. It's the ability to appreciate another person's feelings. And here's the key part of this, though. Without yourself becoming so emotionally involved that your judgment is affected. That's the key. So you can understand, because if you're feeling all emotional, like if you're in it and you're feeling all the emotions, your judgment's going to be affected. You're not using your prefrontal cortex, you're not thinking clearly or rationally. But to have empathy is to have that feeling, but still also be able to think clearly in the moment, right? Pretty, like that's a really important, like last part of that. Actually, let me talk about that later. That's important. But we don't have time now because I want to get to the professor. So there's 3 kinds of empathies. You have cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. Cognitive is when you know or you try to know what someone's thinking. Emotional is when you try to understand what someone is feeling. And then compassionate empathy is when you're so moved that you actually try to help that person. This is one of the most important things in life. Atticus Finch, in To Kill a Mockingbird, he said, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb in his skin and walk around in it. Great Gatsby, Nick's dad, said, in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been I love that line, I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world have not had the advantages that you've had. When I see the rioting now, consider this. By the way, let me just say up front, no one should riot or loot ever. Never. There's never a true rational justification for it. You should be arrested on the spot for damaging property. You should not riot or loot. It makes no rational sense, and it just destroys your neighborhood and other people's lives. It does nothing to bring about justice that you say you want. That's true, and I understand why people do it. Right? I understand why people do it. I said this on the radio the other day, and someone called and said, Slater, I can't believe you condone rioting and looting. Unbelievable. You just said it was okay that people... No. I didn't say it was okay. I understand. Do you understand? My thought of this is, when you perceive, whether it's real or imagined, that you've been injusticed for so long and there's nothing you can do about it, now it's about inflicting injustice for a change. Like, now you're in charge. You get a strong sense of unity when you're in a mob of people, especially at night with fire. It just like feels big. There's unity to that. And also, our brains confuse any action and activity with progress. Right? People are thinking, well, I can't do anything good here, so I'm just going to burn this building down, because then it feels, at least I'm doing something. It feels, and I'm doing something, therefore it must be good. People try to make rational sense out of this. Stop trying, you're not going to. Right? People are like, oh, I can't understand why, they're not, there's nothing rational about rioting and looting. It's all emotional. If you feel powerless and helpless, burning down an AutoZone feels like revenge. It feels like unity. It feels like power. It feels like I did something productive. That's all that is. There's no rationale behind it, right? Makes sense? But I think it's important to have that empathy. Like, I get why you're doing it. I have empathy for it. But my emotional empathy connection to understanding why you're doing this, I can still use my judgment and say, oh, that's not the thing you should be doing. Does that distinction make sense? Quick point on unity. There's a viral video going around, and it's this guy looking into the camera. You guys can play it here. And he's talking about his family. Telling a little bit about his life, things he likes. He's a big Nashville Predators fan, talking about his family, stuff like that. Here's this nice line. He says, I'm convinced that if you met my mother, you'd automatically become a better person. It's a good line, right? And his dad's a veteran, stuff like that. And he ends it with, I just wanted you to get to know me better. Now, he actually says, I just wanted you to get to know me better before you call the cops. He could have just ended it at, I just wanted you to get to know you better. And it just ended it there, right? That would have been good. And it's important because we're so tribal. Our first instinct always is to find someone who looks different from us and think that they're a threat. We're wired to do that. And the easiest way to see if someone's different from you is to see their skin color. It's the most obvious thing that's different. But once you get past that, anything past that, any point of unity beyond skin color, the skin color then becomes completely meaningless. Right? So you see some guy, your first knee-jerk response was, oh, he looks different. But then in this guy's case, oh, you're a Nashville Predators fan? I've been to a Predators game, it's awesome. Oh, you live in Nashville? I love Nashville. Boom, unity, you got it. It just takes a split second to find. Now, someone wrote back, they said, oh, I appreciate what this guy's doing, but black people shouldn't have to do things like this in order to be treated with equality and dignity by white people. It's like, yeah, of course. But we treat everyone with dignity all the time. But it's always helpful to get to know other people better so that we can have more empathy. Because the more we can do that, the much better, much easier, much more meaningfully we can get through this together. Coming up next, talk to Professor Vincent Racaniello from Columbia University. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to get our weekly update from Professor of Virology at Columbia University, Professor Vincent Racaniello. Professor, how are you, sir?
Good morning. How are you doing on this Monday?
Yes, sir. It feels going to feel like a long week already, I can tell. This is not to belittle anything else that's going on in the news, right? It's all very important, right? But are you, as a virology professor, a little frustrated and or concerned that there's just no attention paid to the pandemic anymore at all?
Well, as you said, there are other things happening which are pretty important, and you have to search a little harder. I think it'll come back as soon as this passes. So I don't worry too much about it, but I'm still thinking about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, good. And are you seeing protests? And again, not to dismiss any other concern that's out, but I think of it as like we hear these stories about the Spanish flu parades in Philadelphia and whatnot, and all the people, right? Are you concerned about these younger folks out there spreading it around?
For sure. No, when a lot of people get together and protest or whatever they're doing, especially if they're not wearing face masks, and I saw a lot of them not. It's the potential to spread. And that's one of the things I want to emphasize today. People need to remember, just because it's not on the front page, the virus is still around, right? So be careful. You have to watch out. I was thinking that, we just had a Memorial Day weekend and a lot of people got together. So I'm going to wait in 2 weeks and see if we have a big outbreak as a result of that. That'll be an interesting experiment to do, right?
Yeah.
To see if, as we would predict, when people get together, we have more infections.
And it'll be the same thing here probably 2 weeks after. Okay, let's start from the beginning again. So what have you learned this week, Professor? What are you thinking about that we need to know about the virus?
So I've been thinking about Memorial Day, which I already told you about. This past week, 2 studies came out on 2 antiviral drugs that are important to think about. One is remdesivir, which came out to be okay. It helps save some lives. But I just want people to remember that remdesivir has to be given intravenously. So it's not for everybody. It's only if you're really sick and you go to the hospital. Okay, so maybe it'll save some lives. So that's good news. Now, the other paper that came out is a paper on hydroxychloroquine, which made a big splash before you and I started meeting weekly here. And this paper says it really doesn't do much good. And in fact, it makes some people have heart problems. So we shouldn't be using it for treating infection. So those are 2 really important studies, I think, to remember. We still don't have something that all of us could take as a pill. And hopefully that'll come soon.
The HCQ one, was that HCQ with zinc? Or does that make a difference at all, or what?
They didn't look with zinc. They looked with 2 other antibiotics, azithromycin, and they looked at chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine with or without the antibiotic. It didn't make any difference either way.
Right.
It was not helpful, and it made people get a little sicker with other problems. Yeah.
Do you find that pretty conclusive? Like, are you off the HCQ bandwagon? I'm not sure if you were ever on it, right? But is HCQ no longer a thing, or should we still kind of keep looking at it and studying it?
No, I think I would say it's no longer a thing. I did think it was a good thing in the beginning. I wrote about it being good based on some French studies, which weren't perfect, but they looked pretty good. But now I would say no, we shouldn't bother. I mean, there are some more trials in progress, so we'll see the results of those at some point. But I would move on. Let's move on. There's nothing here.
Okay, very good, very good. I'm grateful for that. Let's start checking things off the list. You know what I mean? What do you say about, we're just talking about in 2 weeks from now, who knows what's going to happen. What do you say about some of the states that have quote unquote reopened and cases are going down? What variables are you looking for that has resulted in that being the case?
Right. So this is important because it's uneven as to which states are opening or reopening and not. New York City is not open yet, although upstate New York, which is less densely populated, is slowly opening. And I look to see how the case numbers go, because in many states, the daily case number is declining, the hospitalization is declining, all that is good. And I look to see if people start going back out, is it going to go up again, or is it going to go down? It might not go up right away. You remember last time we spoke, we talked about this idea that 10% of the infected people are transmitting 80% of the infections, right? And so maybe at this low level, we're at the point where those 10% are so rare that we're not going to encounter them. So I want to look at these states that reopen and see within 2 weeks, because that's the incubation period, whether we have a spike up again. If we don't, that's good news, and we can consider opening a little bit more and more. But the key is, and we've said this before, we have to do it gradually and carefully. We can't just do it all at once. But I think if you manage it properly and you look at those numbers, then you can do better.
Do we have any more insight now about I don't know what the right word is, the virulence of it? Like, I'm trying to think how it spreads, or how virulent it spreads. Is it less than we thought, or still about the same as we thought months ago, or where are you at on that?
All right, so let me do a little professoring here, okay?
Please.
So there are 2 different things here. There's transmission of the virus, that is how well it spreads from person to person. And then there is the virulence, how many people that are infected it kills, right?
Okay.
Those are 2 separate properties of the virus.
Really?
And,
wait, so virulence is the connected to the just truly death, like that outcome.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so what I was really asking was more about the transmission.
Okay, so the transmission has not changed. Remember the reproductive index, the R naught, that's the number of people on average that one infected person can infect. It's still between 2 and 3, based on early studies in China, but we can change that, by isolation, quarantine, and so forth. And our goal is to get it below 1, and that will stop the outbreak. But there's a fundamental R naught of the virus, which doesn't change. But then the effective R naught in a population, you could bring lower. And so in areas where the circulation is going down, it's because we reduce the R naught. Absolutely. Okay.
And the fundamental R naught has not changed. They still think that's what it is.
That does not. So the fundamental is if you have a room full of people and you throw an infected person in there with no interventions, how many people will they infect, right? That never changes. But the actual R naught in the real world can be affected by various quarantines and so forth, right?
Okay.
And that's
good. I came across this professor. I think he's in London somewhere. Or I think it's genealogy or not genealogy. That wouldn't be right. Professor Francois Ballou. I don't know. He seems like a smart guy though. So here's what he said. Recent preprint reporting that 24 out of 24, so 100% of people from Singapore infected with SARS-1 in 2003 have pre-existing T-cell immunity against SARS-CoV-2. Let's just stop there. So what's T-cell immunity? We'll start with that.
Okay, so when you're infected with the virus, your immune system responds, right? And it makes two different kinds of responses. It makes antibodies, which are the big proteins that circulate in your blood and your tissues. They clamp onto the virus and they prevent it from infecting. And then there are T cells, which are a different part of their immune response. Their job is to find cells that are infected and kill them. We call them killer T cells, right? And so that's what we're talking about here. And there's memory. So after you're recovered, you have antibody and T cell memory, which means that if you're infected again, they can respond quickly and eliminate the infection.
I guess I apologize. I guess I don't understand the difference between the two.
Okay, so an antibody is just it's just a protein that's made by B cells. Okay, so we have B and T cells. B cells make these proteins called antibodies that flow around, and they look for viruses. And when they find one, they attach to it and they eliminate it. It's just a little protein. A T cell is an entire cell which has proteins on its surface, and it goes around your body. It patrols everywhere. So your respiratory tract, your intestinal tract, and it looks for virus-infected cells. It can tell if a cell is virus-infected, and when it finds them, it latches onto it and kills it so that it can't make any more virus.
Oh, it kills the cell. So it doesn't just kill the virus, it kills the cell.
The cell, exactly.
Wow. The body's amazing, Professor.
It kills the cell to interrupt. It's like bombing a factory. So you can't make any more airplanes, right? So you're killing the cell, and that's the end of it. And that's what they find in these patients in Singapore. They still have T cells from SARS-1. The question is, will they protect people from SARS-2? And that's an interesting question. Some of them might actually, because the proteins that these T cells are recognizing could be similar between SARS-1 and 2. So that's very interesting finding. Yes, I like that very much. So you got that.
That's amazing. T cell.
Yes.
I remember like weeks and weeks ago, I asked you something, and I was just blown away by the body. And you went on this beautiful thing about how the body's amazing. Like, I've never even heard of T cells before. It's amazing we have that and that our body can do that. Stunning.
There's much more. There's much more.
Yeah, the more you know, right? The more you know, I'm sure the more amazed you are. Last question, Professor, and we have to run. I apologize for one segment today.
No problem.
We had a ton happening today.
No, you don't like me anymore.
No, Professor, never the case. Never the case, sir. Trust me, you've become family folklore in the Slater family. My mom, every time I talk to her, what's the professor say? What's the latest with the professor? Can the professor say I can get on a plane or no? Can I get on? Fatality rate right now. Is it even calculable still? And is it lower than you thought? Where are we headed with that?
It's hard to calculate because you really don't know all the people who are infected, right? Because there's so many people infected with mild symptoms or no symptoms, which is about 80% of infections. that it's really hard to figure out the fatality rate. And if you just do the crude calculation where you take the number of people who have died divided by the number of infections, it depends on the country too, because some countries with good health systems, the number is lower than others. South Korea was less than 1%. In Italy, it was in 2, 3, 4, 5%. So that's really a very squishy number. But as the pandemic goes on and towards the end, we'll be able to get a better number on that. But it's quite high. It's a high number, and that's the problem with so many people getting infected. We're going to have a lot of deaths. And the U.S. we've had 100,000, and hardly anyone really has been infected compared to the whole population, right? So
wow, that's the key sentence that everyone forgets. That we barely scratched the surface. So I think my takeaway from you, Professor, is you're not distracted by the fact that this isn't on the front page of newspapers. You still feel the same you did about it now as you did weeks ago?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is my life, and I think more people should like viruses like I do, but I understand. So I think about it every day. Every minute of the day, I'm thinking about something about this. Believe me.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm grateful you have a podcast, too. This Week in Virology, 12 years going strong. And Professor, we're super grateful for your time here, too.
My pleasure. See you next week.
Yes, sir. We'll do it next week, next Monday. That's our show, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word.